There are moments in life you wish you could forget, but you can't. They etch themselves into your mind, becoming an inseparable part of who you are. On a cold winter evening in suburban New Jersey, Marcus sat in his old armchair, the blue light from the TV screen casting a harsh glow on his face. He had no idea that this moment would change everything. Forever. Marcus wasn't anyone special. He was just an ordinary software engineer, living a life so normal it was almost boring. His wife, Sarah, was working the night shift at the hospital, leaving him with a free evening to indulge in his guilty pleasure. True crime documentaries. The documentary on the Investigation Discovery Channel was called Unsolved Disappearances. It told stories of cold cases, of people who vanished without a trace. Marcus had watched many such shows. It was a peculiar hobby, a way for him to escape his own reality for a while. That night's episode focused on a disappearance that had occurred more than 30 years ago. The case of a young woman named Eleanor Vance, who had vanished from a small Pennsylvania town in 1993. As the narrator, with his low, mysterious voice, began to describe the case details, Marcus felt a sense of unease. A cold shiver ran down his spine. While the specifics of the case were unremarkable, a young woman, a mother suddenly gone. There was one thing Marcus couldn't tear his eyes away from. The photograph. It was a faded picture of a young woman with fiery red hair, deep blue eyes full of hope, and a radiant smile. It was old, but Marcus recognized her instantly. It was his mother, the woman he believed had died in a car accident when he was a child. The documentary continued, talking about Eleanor's distraught husband, David Vance, who had to raise their young son, Marcus, alone. Marcus. That was his name. No, it couldn't be. He shuddered, his heart pounding. He stood up, trying to calm the rising fear within him. It had to be a mistake. The photo was just a bizarre coincidence. Millions of people in the world look alike. But when the show played interviews with old neighbors who spoke of Eleanor with love and sorrow, giving small details about her habits and her way of dressing, they were identical to the stories his father, David, used to tell him about his own mother, Elizabeth. This coincidence couldn't be random. David had told him that Elizabeth had passed away in a car accident when he was just 3 years old. He never wanted to talk about her, saying the pain was too much. Marcus had accepted this, believing the story for 30 years. But now he was seeing his mother on a TV screen, identified as Eleanor Vance, a missing person in an unsolved case. And his father, David Vance, was described as a grief-stricken husband. The initial fear slowly turned into anger and confusion. Who was Eleanor? Who was Elizabeth? And what had his father, David, lied to him about? The documentary ended with a plea. If you have any information about Eleanor Vance, please contact us. The screen went black. Marcus sat there, completely motionless. His life, his childhood memories, the stories he had trusted, were all shattered. His father, the man he had always respected, might be an entirely different person. He might be hiding a terrible secret. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He rummaged through his father's old bookshelf, looking for anything related to his mother. He found an old box, filled with photos and letters. Among them was his birth certificate, listing his mother as Elizabeth Thompson, not Eleanor Vance, and a wedding photo of his parents. The woman in the photo was not the woman from the documentary. Marcus's initial fear vanished, replaced by a new, mysterious question. Who was Eleanor Vance? Why did she look so much like his mother? And could his father be involved? He had to find the truth. The discovery in his father's old box left Marcus more confused than ever. On one hand, it seemed to prove his mother was Elizabeth Thompson, and his father's story about her death in a car accident was true. On the other hand, the chilling resemblance between Elizabeth and Eleanor in the documentary still haunted him. 2 women, 2 stories, but the same face. That level of coincidence was unbelievable. Marcus couldn't accept such a simple explanation. He had to dig deeper. Even though he had found what seemed like evidence to disprove the link between his mother and Eleanor, a part of him deep down felt something was wrong. Marcus began searching for information online. He searched for Eleanor Vance missing 1993, David Vance, Pennsylvania. A flood of old articles and online forums about the cold case appeared. He read each one, trying to find any detail that could link Eleanor to his family. He discovered that David Vance, Eleanor's husband, had been considered a prime suspect by investigators, but they never found any evidence to charge him, and the case was closed. David Vance had moved to a different town, changed his identity, and started a new life. He did so under a new name, David Thompson, Marcus's father. This explained why Marcus found a birth certificate with his mother's name as Elizabeth Thompson. It was the family's new identity. Marcus's heart pounded erratically. He found an old photo of David Vance on one of the forums. That face, it was unmistakable. It was his father. David Thompson, the father he had always loved, was David Vance, a suspect in a disappearance case. Marcus's entire life had been built on a lie. His mother, Elizabeth Thompson, was not his biological mother. And Eleanor Vance, the woman in the documentary, was his real mother, who had mysteriously vanished. But then, who was Elizabeth Thompson? And why did his father live with another woman, using a new wife's name, and tell him she was his mother? This made the story even more complex. Could his father have left Eleanor for Elizabeth? Could Elizabeth have helped his father cover up Eleanor's case? These speculations led Marcus to a bold decision. He had to go back to where it all began. The small town in Pennsylvania. The place where David Vance once lived with Eleanor, where she had disappeared. He told Sarah he was going on a business trip. He packed his bags and drove east, toward a place that felt foreign yet familiar. When he arrived, the town looked peaceful. Small houses, empty streets, old grocery stores. It was like a faded painting. Marcus spent the next few days searching for information about Eleanor. He went to the town library, sifting through old newspapers. He visited the neighborhoods where Eleanor had lived, talking to old neighbors. An old woman named Martha, who had lived there her whole life, remembered Eleanor's case. She told Marcus, her voice full of regret, Eleanor was a wonderful girl. She always smiled. But her husband, he was unpredictable. Sometimes he was very kind, but sometimes he was very scary. She also mentioned another woman, a close friend of Eleanor's, named Elizabeth. Elizabeth had come to town for a short time before Eleanor went missing. She described Elizabeth as a beautiful woman with dark hair, but with a mysterious demeanor. She said that after Eleanor vanished, David Vance and their young son also disappeared. Elizabeth was never seen in town again either. All these pieces started fitting together, forming a terrifying picture. David Vance had killed Eleanor, and then had Elizabeth help him cover up the crime. He had changed his identity, married Elizabeth, and told Marcus she was his biological mother. Marcus felt an intense pain and anger. His father, the man he had always trusted, was a murderer. The discovery about Elizabeth Thompson sent Marcus down a dark path. He drove back home, his mind heavy and clouded. He had lived with a murderer and an accomplice. Elizabeth, the woman who had played the role of his mother throughout his childhood, was the one who had helped his father cover up a crime. The question was no longer just why, but also how did they do it? He needed to confront his father, but he didn't know how. The weight of the truth was crushing him. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't work, he couldn't do anything. He began to observe his father closely. David Thompson, the gentleman who always smiled and loved him, seemed like a stranger. Every time he looked at him, Marcus saw the image of David Vance, the murderer. He remembered how his father would avoid talking about the past, and how his stories about his mother were always vague and incomplete. All of it now had a new meaning. One evening, after dinner, Marcus decided to talk to his father. He subtly asked about his mother, about old memories. David seemed a bit uncomfortable, but he tried to answer. When Marcus mentioned Eleanor Vance, he flinched, almost dropping the glass in his hand. "How do you know about her?" he asked, his voice full of tension. Marcus felt his heart pound. This was his chance. "I watched a documentary about her case," he said. "Her picture, it looked eerily like my mother. I did some digging, and I found out that my biological mother wasn't Elizabeth Thompson, but Eleanor Vance. And you're David Vance." David Thompson sat motionless, his eyes staring blankly at Marcus. After a moment of silence, he sighed and began to tell the story. "I loved Eleanor," he said. "She was everything to me, but we fought a lot. One day we had a fight. I didn't mean to, but she fell. She hit her head on the table and died. I was panicked. I didn't know what to do." Marcus felt sick to his stomach. His father was confessing to a crime. "I called Elizabeth," he continued. "She was Eleanor's best friend. She had loved me for a long time, but I never noticed. I told her what happened. She helped me. We buried Eleanor in a place no one would ever find. Elizabeth became your mother. She loved you as her own. We changed our identities and moved away to start a new life." This story completely shattered Marcus. He had lived with two murderers, one who had killed his biological mother, and the other who had helped him cover up the crime. He looked at his father, the man who had raised him, who had taught him how to play soccer and fix things. He wasn't a monster. He was just a man who had made a mistake. But that mistake had cost a woman her life. Marcus didn't know what to do. He couldn't go to the police because it was his father. But he also couldn't live with this secret. He felt trapped between his love for his father and the horrifying truth. He had to find a way out. He had to do the right thing. But what was the right thing? The truth was out, but questions still remained. His father had killed Eleanor, but what about Elizabeth? Why did she help his father? Was it a blind love? Or was there another motive? Marcus decided to find out more about Elizabeth. He began to go through her mementos, her letters, her diaries. He found an old diary of Elizabeth's, hidden at the bottom of a box. In it, she had written about her relationship with Eleanor and David. Elizabeth had been in love with David long before he married Eleanor. She had been jealous of their happiness, and she had plotted to break up their marriage. She had caused fights between David and Eleanor, and had created a situation that made David lose control. When David called her and told her Eleanor was dead, she seized the opportunity. She helped him cover up the crime with one condition. David had to marry her and raise Marcus with her. It wasn't an act of love, but an act of manipulation, a cruel revenge. Elizabeth had wanted it all, David and Eleanor's son. Marcus felt a deep sense of horror and disgust. Elizabeth, the woman he thought was his mother, was a devil. She wasn't just an accomplice. She was the mastermind behind the whole crime. She had ruined Eleanor's life, and had lived a life of lies, happy on the pain of others. With the evidence in hand, Marcus went to a lawyer and the police. He gave them everything he knew: Elizabeth's diary, his father's confession. At first, they were skeptical, but when Marcus provided the specific evidence, they reopened the case. They found Eleanor's burial site and arrested David Thompson. He was convicted of murder. Elizabeth didn't live long enough to face justice, but her diary had exposed all the truth. The case sent shockwaves across the country. Everyone was shocked to learn that an ordinary man, a loving father, had hidden a terrible crime for 30 years. Marcus had gone through a painful journey, but he had found the truth. He had brought justice to his biological mother, Eleanor Vance. He was living a new life, no longer haunted by lies. He had learned that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living a sweet lie. And he knew that love, trust, and forgiveness are not always simple. Sometimes we have to face difficult truths to truly live a meaningful life. This story is a reminder that things are not always what they seem. Behind ordinary facades, dark secrets can be hidden. Always ask questions, always seek the truth, and never accept things blindly. And if you've watched this far, I want to say, thank you so much for listening. This story is a wake-up call, a reminder of the importance of truth. If you found this story helpful and interesting, don't forget to like this video. If you want to see more fascinating stories, subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos. See you in next videos.